Welcome back to another episode of Tell Your Story Alaska. I have with me some guests, Steve and Jill Horsman. And Steve and Jill are you'll have to tell me what titles you have. Field Director of InterAct.
I'm InterAct, Alaska's Field Director.
Alaska's Field Director of InterAct. Okay. And so we're going to get into what all that means. But Steve and Jill have been doing this for quite a long time. They've been with InterAct since the 1980s.
Mm-hmm. Yes, late 80s.
That's amazing. And InterAct has quite a long history, 70 years here in Alaska and also in Canada and Russia. And for those who are familiar with Alaska, if you have ever heard of Victory Bible Camp, Wasilla Bible Church, Lazy Mountain Church, the Alaska Bible Institute, or Native Music Cal, or if you've heard of Kako Retreat Center, or if you've ever heard of Tanalian Bible Camp, or if you've ever heard of Kokrine Hills Bible Camp,
Camp Liowa,
and there are more. If you ever heard of anything, you can say thank you to InterAct because they played a heavy role in each of these ministries across Alaska. And so I've asked Steve and Jill to come on to talk about the story of InterAct and then what they're up to today. So Steve and Jill, thank you for coming on my show.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, we're glad to be here.
Well, I'm excited to learn from you. So let's start from, let's get like a 1-minute synopsis from each of you about like, where are you from and how did you end up in Alaska? Steve, let's start with you.
Well, I was raised in Tucson, Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
I accepted the Lord at a free church in Tucson in my high school years. And I got called to a Bible college in British Columbia, Canada.
Oh.
So I went there, went to Bible college there. I did some work up there. I worked as a in the construction industry.
Was that difficult? Like from Tucson, where it's like 100 degrees, to BC, where it's like negative 100?
Well, the hardest part of the whole thing was realizing that you could actually skate on ice instead of just put it in a glass. And so my first time out on a lake, I had to stomp up and down on the lake. They said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm just checking the ice is thick enough." Well, yeah, it was about a foot thick. So I had planned.
And you go, "Is that a lot?" I don't know.
I have no idea. Will it hold my weight? And I said, "Oh yeah." But then I went to Illinois, and that's when I met my wife as I was traveling from Illinois or from British Columbia to New Jersey, taking a friend of mine home.
Mm-hmm.
And I stayed in Illinois I was going to be in Illinois for 3 days. I ended up being there 7 years, and Jill trapped me.
So you never made it to New Jersey?
Well, no, we went to New Jersey. Was there a month, came back.
Okay, and then you went back. Gotcha.
And then I stayed there for 3 days and ended up being there for 7 years.
And that's how you met
And
Jill.
then that's how I met Jill. Went into Christian camping there in Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
I was involved in the Ministry of Christian Camping.
That was a Timberlee, is that right? Because I'm pretty sure I went to Timberlee as a high school kid.
Yeah.
Because we've been talking, we have these weird connections. Because I grew up in Illinois.
Yeah.
You know, I think I've been to Timberlee. We know some of the same people.
What years were you there?
At Timberlee?
Yeah.
Oh, this would have been like, I was either in junior high or high school. So that would be sometime between 96 and 2002.
We were gone by that time, but I went back. I'd been back and forth a lot. I trained horseback riding instructors and wilderness packing guides, and so I did a lot of training and certifying of their staff and things. So then went to a camp at Victory Bible Camp and ran the horse program there. For 2 years,
in Alaska.
Yeah, and that was with InterAct Ministries,
Mm-hmm.
and that's then they asked us if we'd be interested in church planting in central British Columbia, Canada.
So the horse work was actually what got you here.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I've always been around horses all my life, and I was an industrial engineer before I went into Ministry of Christian Camping, and
your last name is
Horsman. Yeah, the Lord has a sense of humor, doesn't he?
Yeah. That was my dad joke moment there.
Yeah. Well, it's gotten a lot of mileage.
I'm sure. All right, so good. Jill, tell us your background and how you ended up here.
Okay, well, I grew up in Rockford, Illinois, which we like to say is right on the border of Wisconsin. Both of my parents were from Wisconsin. I was a Jacobson, by the way. I had a normal last name. And I met Steve as he was visiting some of our joint friends. And, he was pretty handsome, but he was leaving, so he left. But then he came back. And terrifyingly, then he stayed. And, we fell in love and all of that good stuff.
Terrifying when handsome men stay.
Yeah. And so we were just newlyweds and a new family going to our sending church in Illinois. And one day Steve came home and said, we'd been there, I don't know, a couple of years, heavily involved in a lot of different things. And Steve came home and said to this mom of 3 kids, hey, I think we should go into Christian camping. Well, I grew up with a Midwest mindset where you just live a normal life and you stay a block down from your family and nobody leaves. You just stay there. So that was pretty terrifying. But it's amazing how we saw God move in just miraculous ways. We had we were so blessed to have so many people in the Sunday school class, just one generation older than us, that discipled us and mentored us and cared for us and helped mobilize us into missions. I think Pastor Jim Forstrom being one of them. He's now with the Lord. But so we ended up at Timberley.
Yeah.
And while we were there, I finished my elementary ed degree in Wisconsin. So I have that license in Wisconsin. And we were there 9 years, and it was great. Our kids loved it. We have 3 redheads and a lot of redheaded other family members now. And then Steve went to Victory, came up here to do a clinic, and he came back and started talking, I think we should join InterAct. Well, that was terrifying.
It was terrifying.
I mean, at one point I had said, I'll do anything except if I have to raise my own support. Like, I will not do that.
Yeah.
Well, you know what happens when you tell God
Whenever we
that.
say that, then he's like,
that's exactly what you're going to do.
You're fearful of that? Let's get that fixed.
So we had such an amazing support team. By that point, we had planted an evangelical free church in Elkhorn, Wisconsin, which is another amazing church. We just have amazing churches that are a part of our partnering team. But tons of support, and a year later found us driving to Alaska, driving in the mountains, which I had never done, in March.
It was kind of funny because most of the time she had a pillowcase over her head because we were in the mountains, driving in the mountains, and she did not like it.
I thought you went around them. So it was, and I
drive over them.
Yes.
And then we got the Victory Bible Camp, which is in the heart of mountains.
Yeah.
It's a very narrow road, 1,000-foot drop off down to the river.
Before all the road improvements.
Yeah. Yes.
But we got to Victory. We loved it. We thought we were going to be there forever. Well, we thought we were going to be in Wisconsin forever. And some of the best advice I ever got from a pastor's wife was, no matter where you are, live as though you're going to be there the rest of your life. And so that's really how we lived. But God had other plans. And so after 2 years, a little bit more at Victory, God kind of put his finger on, I really want you church planting in Canada in a First Nation reserve, which again, I'm not real brave with some things, but we find ourselves there. We were there for 21 years, and it was amazing. Amazing First Nation people, amazing Canadian friends. We were just blessed in so many ways and got to do so many different things. And then it felt a little bit like ripping up an oak tree when we were then directed, and God kind of led us back here to Alaska, which by this point, 2 of our 3 kids were living here in Alaska. So, I mean,
you got to be near them.
Yeah, and we've been back regularly.
Yeah, and I have done lots of clinics up here, certification clinics for horseback riding instructors and packing guides, and back and forth. And a good friend of mine who got me into this trouble to begin with, Tim Gillespie, and the Gillespie name you'll hear later on. But Tim said, why don't you come up here and help us develop our horseback riding program so we can use it year round? And I said, okay.
Uh-huh.
And so we left Timberley Christian Center and came up to Victory Bible Camp and joined InterAct Ministries. And that was like 1988 when we were accepted with InterAct. And we got up here in 1989. I mean, just like in end of February 1989. And we just absolutely loved it here. Loved the community up at the Glacier View community. What a great group of people. We loved them, and we thought we were going to stay there forever. But
it's amazing how you can just come to a place and it doesn't take long. You go, this is it.
This is it. Yeah. And so when we then moved back in 2013 with a task of trying to help revitalize the ministries on the Lazy Mountain campus and just with InterAct Alaska. And we knew most of the missionaries because we'd come to the conference several times when we had grandkids being born up here. So we were still in touch with everybody. And it was a little bit bittersweet leaving all of our friends in Canada, but it was a sweet homecoming to be back up here in Alaska and to just try to help InterAct Alaska as much as we could. And so we've been here since then.
Yeah. Well, I want to open the door in a minute and talk about InterAct and its history, but I have to ask you because my own curiosity. You talked about the sweetness of the time in Canada with a particular First Nations group. Can you just tell a little bit about that? What was the name of the group and what language did you have to learn?
They're the Tsilhqot'in people or Chilcotin people in central British Columbia, Canada, about 120 miles from Williams Lake, which is along the highway coming up to Alaska.
Along the Alcan there.
Yeah. Well, it's before it turns into the Alcan, but it's on Highway 16, and we absolutely fell in love with the people there. They are such a rich, and they are so fun to be around.
So many dear friends.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
They're just amazing. And we love them. We were there 21 years, which is the longest period of time we've ever been anywhere. Was there. So really, if you want to say home, that's kind of our adopted home.
Yeah.
We have multiple homes. So we're dual citizens.
Oh.
And that's been really fun. The last time we were back visiting so we lived at Zidaldale Reserve. And we had team members that were at Unisitine and Honigwitine. But I mean, there's 6 communities. We have friends in all of them. And I was able to respond and be able to help 2 of the communities with their schools. So I was either classroom teacher or resource teacher or principal of both of them and got to do some really fun things to help those communities develop the school that they want, a school of quality that also had a rich language program. And I got to do some things with the First Nations School Association. So I did a lot of consulting and help in other communities, about 75 communities across BC.
And you say like a school that they want in the sense of like, what do you want taught in this school?
Yeah.
How do you want the day to go for the kids?
It was so much fun.
Yeah.
It was so much fun. So unexpected, not what I thought.
You part of the school curriculum was learning their Indigenous language? Was that?
Yeah, actually in British Columbia, the First Nations School Association, FNSA, has developed a strategy for school certification that meets the federal and provincial requirements for school certification, which they have to do an annual, a year-long evaluation process, self-evaluation, and then the certification chair and a team come in. So I was one of those school certification chairs, would come in and assess and verify, and then they would create a school growth plan. Well, for that process to happen, or process, I should say, for that process to happen, the schools had to have an adequate language and culture curriculum for their school that was every bit as rigorous as their English language arts program.
Wow.
So languageness and just all kinds of cool initiatives.
I love that.
Yeah, it was fun. So we were had some good friends that were helping us to learn Chilcotin. It's a difficult language to learn. We certainly were not fluent, but it was such a privilege to be able to learn and start to think in their language.
We were talking earlier about how, because I learned to speak an indigenous language out of Mexico, and we were talking about some of the similarities.
Yeah.
So like when you say, at the time I saw my cat laying on the couch, so I'd have to say the cat is laying on the couch, or the cat is on the couch. The is, you have to say in a positional form, like the laying down form of the word is. And that's how you know the position of the thing you're talking about. So a chair is bent over, a couch might be bent over, like anything on four legs is bent. So anyway, they have a particular way of using verbs, and it's the same as the indigenous languages in Mexico as it is in Canada. So they're probably in the same language family, which is so there's a connection historically, which is I'm a nerd with that stuff. So
we loved it.
The Chilcotin people are Athabascan.
Okay.
And they are directly related to the Navajo and the Chiricahua Apache people. As a matter of fact,
and all the way up here.
The old Chilcotin and the old Navajo can understand one another. Really? We had some dear friends of ours that were touring around. Yeah. And Danny they stopped at a overpass that had some Navajo jewelry, and he heard some elders talking the old language, and he knew the old Chilcotin. He was very, very fluent in it. Yeah. And so he walked over and started speaking to him in their language. They went, what? They ended up being there for a week and a half.
Yeah, of course.
Visiting these people.
Fun.
Yes. And telling stories. And there are stories from the old stories from the Chilcotin about a group of people that left them and moved south.
Really? And
there's stories in the old Navajo that he tells us that and they left people up north and moved south. So there's huge connection that way, and so it wouldn't be surprising, especially the Chiricahua Apache are the ones that spent a lot of time down in Sonora and down in the.
Are some of those stories recorded or written down somewhere? Or?
There are
Danny might have written some of those things down, but the problem is they are an oral culture. Right. They have oral history, and so written history is not as strong. They're trying to capture some of those by speaking with the elders and and listening to the elders tell their stories, and they're capturing those things. So they're doing a really good job of capturing it.
The First Nations initiative that the government helped fund, and finesse also the First Nation Education Steering Committee were also facilitating some of that. Yeah. And we have some couples that live in Williams Lake that were with Wycliffe and taught at SIL down at Trinity Western University in Langley. And they were also helping to capture some of the stories. Yeah. Sage Birchwater, who is an author that lives in a little town in the Chilcotin, and he has captured a lot of the stories as well.
Yeah.
Are you still in touch with them? I mean, I know this is a segue here, a bunny trail, but I'm very interested in this topic, and I do follow a researcher that's researching tracing the language history, even genetic history, trying to retrace unknown Native American history.
Yeah.
And so he's actually looking for resources like that to help fill in the gaps of the unknown history of Native people.
Well, some of the things that are really noteworthy with the Chilcotin people is the land claims issue that was that's world renowned through the Hanigutin land claims issue, and so you could do land claims issue.
Aboriginal land claim settlement.
Aboriginal land claim settlement, and
you
can get lots of
every international website.
Oh my goodness!
This happened in 2015.
And you're saying those
they were
land
awarded.
claim is connected to some of their oral histories.
Yes.
Yeah.
They had a
back up their land claim. Yeah. Okay.
Connequitine had a letter signed from Queen Victoria saying we will never take your lands.
Oh.
And so, I mean, this settlement, the court case started while we were still there. And I think it was 2015 or 16 when it was finally settled. And they were granted full access to their land.
Full authority, responsibility, and control of their land claim.
Yeah.
So it's one of the largest settlements like that in the world.
Wow.
And
Which hasn't been without.
Well, Jill was involved in the school. I was involved in the school quite a bit as well. But my expertise comes from the horse industry, and the Chilcotin people are wonderful, marvelous horse people. They really, really know horses well, and they're incredibly adept with working with horses and things like that. And so I did a lot of things to work with them to develop a rodeo grounds on the Redstone Reserve. They had some rodeos there before years gone by, and when I came along, they said, yeah, they want to do that some more, and so I kind of worked with them and said, okay, let's see if we can't do something like that.
So his name is Nashling Cho.
Yeah, they call me Nachling Cho.
Nachling Cho.
Nachling Cho, which means he needs a big horse or a big horse.
Because you're a big guy.
Yeah, as a big guy. This guy needs a big horse. And one of the elders gave me that name. The chief of the reserve, Irvin Charlie Boy.
They definitely have more clever. They have more clever ways of calling you a large man.
Yeah. They're very, very generous and very honoring to say you're a really big guy. But the chief, he was talking to the chief, and he said, "Who's that Nachling Cho?" And so then everybody started calling me that, and and I just and. Actually, he became, this elder became a very, very good friend of mine.
Wow.
And wonderful guy.
You are liked when you get a slightly derogatory nickname.
Oh, yeah. they have a lot. They've had a lot of fun with that one. Yeah. That's true.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and you are pretty tall, too. What are you, like 6'2" or something?
Well, I'm 6'4".
Oh, taller than me. Wow.
But anyway, I'm probably shorter since I've been there, because when I was there, I dropped an 800-pound round bale of hay off the bucket of the tractor on the top of my head, and made me a little shorter than I was.
Squished everything a little bit.
Yeah. I lost about an inch.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, man, we are bunny trailing.
Yeah, we are on a rabbit trail.
I love everything you just said. I'm super fascinated in that.
Actually, the Chilcotin would say gach.
Gach. What does that mean?
Rabbit.
Oh,
a rabbit trail.
A gach trail.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what we just want. A gach trail.
A big rabbit.
Man, I even you saying that hay bale story falling on your head and you lost a few inches or whatever. Man, it just sounds like your lives are full of rich stories.
Oh.
And
living in tents for 10 months while we were building a house in the Chilcotin. They thought we were just a crazy white man.
Well, I would have thought you would have frozen in a tent.
Well, we heated rocks in the fire and then wrapped them in towels and put them in the sleeping bags.
I see that on like the Survivor shows.
Yeah.
Warm up a rock with fire and then you put it under the ground.
Well, and the elder gave me my name. He was over one night and was telling me a story. He told me a story about how his dad taught him where to camp when he was a kid. He was just telling me the story. And when he left, I looked and I went, you know what? He's telling me that I'm camping on the wrong side of the draw. And sure enough, there's 10-degree difference. And so I moved the camp over. Yeah. And a couple of days later, he comes by and he says, he's having coffee at night, sitting there, and he just looks at me. And he said, "Warmer?" I said, "Yep." That was the last thing he ever said.
Wow. And he just knew it.
Yeah.
10-degree difference.
And they taught, oh my goodness, they taught me so many things. Yeah. Just amazing.
Well, I think that's kind of the point. I love talking to people like you who have, it's like, when you talk about the American dream, when we use that term, we usually mean, a nice house, a successful career, and a family. And those are all noble pursuits. But there's something about following the Lord and not the American dream that produces a harder life, but a richer life.
Oh my goodness.
You know, I remember sitting, we'd already been through so many things that were unexpected. Like I grew up, nobody else left. All of my family, all the Jacobsons, all the Douglases, everybody just, for the most part, stayed where they belong. We had been through a lot of hard things but it's through those hard things that God gives us an opportunity to see him actually work. It's harder to see him at work when you have a regular job with regular paychecks and you have a house. If you're living the American dream, it's not that God isn't working, but it sometimes looks differently. And I remember sitting on a sunny day, it was a warm day, sitting outside the tent with coffee and Bible and thinking, you know, God, you've given us so many hard things to go through where we can look and say, okay, we can trust you. It may not be fun. I mean, we went through times where all we had to eat for a month was oatmeal, where we're stopping and looking at dead deer along the road. Well, yeah, but
not for a month.
It's better when when you have sugar to go with it. But when you're frying it up,
but when you run out of milk and sugar in the middle of the month,
yes,
it gets a little hard.
But I think that has been one of the biggest blessings, that he's given us so many opportunities to see that we really can trust him, even when things aren't good, even when things aren't pleasant and comfortable.
As a matter of fact, it's so much easier to trust God when you're in the middle of difficulty than it is to trust God when you're in the middle of abundance. That's why the Apostle Paul said that I know how to live in abundance or being abased.
Can you unpack that a little bit? Because is it because you've seen evidence that he is trustworthy?
Yes.
Unpack that a little bit.
When you're in the middle of difficulty, you tend to, be introspective and you start thinking, oh, woe is me and how horrible is this? But if you're in it long enough and you're in that struggle long enough, pretty soon you start looking for something else. And so it's like in Psalms. The Psalms are basically one long lament.
Yes.
And you come to God and I can come to God and I can complain. I can complain and gripe and grouse about, this is not fair, this is not right. And then I can ask requests, help me overcome this. My enemies are trying to surround me. This world is trying to destroy me. Help me. And then there's always, in every lament, there's always a but or even though statement. And that but or even though, whether you relieve me of this pressure or not, I will trust in you. And the reason why is because we've seen God trustworthy. And we can and it's the same thing. And that's what I used when I was doing horses, working with horses and stuff like that. I would take, and that's one of the things, the Chilcotin people were horse people like crazy, like I said. But I can take scripture and I can have a horse that's totally frightened, terrified of me, and I can use scripture to build trust because God's word is true. And if it's applied properly, then it will have an effect. It will have God's effect. It won't have I'm not doing it just so I can have an easier life. I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do, regardless of my circumstance or situation. And so I've learned to be content, whether I'm abounding with all kinds of good things, or I'm abounding with wonderful feelings, or whether I'm abased, where I just feel like the world is caving in on me. I know, because of history and because I've seen it happen over and over and over and over again, that God, at the moment that it's important, that God says, here, I will lift you up. So in his time, he will lift us up and set us on that high rock to where we feel like we're caught in the we're caught in the tidal flats, and the tide's coming in, and when we're afraid that we're going to be overcome by the cold and die stuck in the tidal flats. But right at the right time, God will pick me up and set me on that high, dry rock to where I can be saved. But here's the reality: even if He doesn't, and I die, I know where I'm going, and that's the important thing.
That's like what it's like to have an anchor of the soul.
Absolutely.
When you were talking, it reminded me of just so much of the Old Testament is, in the Torah, the first 5 books, so much of when the law is given, remember, you were enslaved in Egypt and now you are free. Yeah. And so there's so much talk about remembering and creating ceremony, which are almost all celebratory. And so it's like, celebrate this thing, the feasts of booths, certain unleavened bread stuff. They were all celebratory, and it's like, do these celebrations to remember. It's why we do Thanksgiving. Let's remember something in the history. And so in our own lives, to have these markers, even something on your wall in your home that's personal to remember. And the longer we live and walk through life, the more you have those little markers. Yeah. And that's like the command, right? Remember.
Like the little Ebenezers of life.
Yeah. And remember so that I don't have to remind you with some other difficulty.
Yeah. Well, and He does that a lot. He will teach us. He will teach us to trust Him by the life experiences that we have to wrestle with. The old statement, there's not much growth that takes place on a mountaintop. All the growth takes place down in the valley where all the mud and muck is. That's where the growth takes place.
I mean, I think that I did not grow up thinking, oh, I want to be a missionary. So all of this for me was so unexpected. I couldn't actually plan for it, which I like to plan things ahead of time. Difficult things and good things happen to everybody. It doesn't matter no matter what you're doing. If you live in Rockford, Illinois still, you face all of those same things in life. But as I look back over all of our years in missions or at the camp in ministry, I think being a missionary is not the easiest way to live. But it is the richest way to live. If God's called you into it, it is the richest life that you can possibly have and the most fulfilling. Yes. Because you're seeing God work in other people's lives. And it's just fun.
I heard someone told me recently, if you're struggling, like God is silent in your life, or, if you want to hear from God, disciple someone. Watch Him work.
Yeah.
And, like you talked about, just sitting, if you live a very comfortable life, not that I'm skeptical of that, but only that without any struggle, we don't learn much. I only learned how to fly planes by struggling to learn how to do it. And that's true even in our spiritual walks. We have to wrestle with God.
Yeah. Well, and I think if you never are in a situation where trusting God is tangible, urgent, and necessary. And I don't know, I feel like God has just given us different experiences that maybe we just needed to learn that lesson over and over again. But we've had a lot of opportunities where we've seen God's faithfulness, even though things have been hard.
Yeah. And so it's really important to remember that God loves us, and He loves us so much that He sent His only Son to this world to live a hard life, to suffer incredible torment, and to suffer the excruciating pain of crucifixion, to die, to be buried, and to be raised again to life. So that he did that so that we could have a relationship with Him, even and this happened even when we were just full of sin. He brought that resurrection to us through Jesus Christ and through his shed blood, so that we might be able to stand before God in his throne in humility and completely unworthy, but he did that because he loves us. And so how can I resist that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I heard it. You made me think of a quote. I think it's a John Piper quote, and I'm going to butcher it because it's just off the top of my head. But he said something like, out of the characteristics of God's love, he satisfied the justice of God by putting his wrath on his own son. It was like all of his characteristics. He's a God of love, but he's also a God of justice and wrath. And he satisfied all of those characteristics in himself, in his own son.
Yeah.
And so we had no part in it, but he took care of it, all of those things for us.
Because he loves us.
Right. Yeah.
You know, he breathed his very life into us. He didn't do that with the animals. He didn't do that with the plants. Mm-hmm. He spoke and they came up. He created man, and he breathed his life. He breathed into us because of his tremendous love. Mm-hmm. It's just,
and I think you had mentioned earlier that we have customs, we have traditions to help remember. I was just thinking of this quote, and I don't actually know who said this, but the past steps on the heels of the present. And we're called to remember what Christ has done, but we're also called to remember what Christ has done, what God has done in our own lives, in our families' lives, in our organization's life, in our church's lives. Those things are important for so many reasons.
You know, history matters. It really matters.
Yeah.
It's important. You know, the idea of the future steps on the heels of
the present.
Yeah.
We're not smart enough to remember.
Yeah.
That's why we have tradition.
I got a great memory. I got a great memory. It's only a 1/4 inch long. but that's why history matters, and that's why we really enjoy looking at the history of missions here in Alaska, and the role that InterAct Ministries, or back then Arctic Missions, and even before that Alaska Mission, for a few years, the saints that went before us did a marvelous work. And what we're saying is, where do we go from now? We're not saying they did anything wrong. We're saying they did everything great. There's some tremendous things that the saints that have passed before us have done. Our elders, the way the native people of Alaska and the First Nations people of Canada talk about, that went before us, paved a great path, for others to follow.
So this is a really good segue, because the intention is to talk about InterAct.
Yeah.
We're just, I'm just really enjoying talking to you guys. So let's remember some history. Let's talk about the history of InterAct to great context of where it came from, what it is. So I know it started in 1941 because I stalked it on the internet, and you have a website. 1941 by John and Nadine
Gillespie.
It's a good Scandinavian name.
Well, and I'm Swedish, and so I should be able to do it, but I'm so just American, and if people who listen to this, normally when it comes to like names of villages and stuff, I'm just butchering them. I feel so bad because I'm trying. Okay. 1941, John and Nadine Gillespie arrive in Alaska. So let's open up that history.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, John and Nadine Gillespie met at Multnomah Bible.
At where?
Multnomah School of the Bible in Oregon.
Oh, in Oregon.
And they got married. Mm-hmm. And on their honeymoon, they took a cruise to Alaska, basically.
They had cruises in 1941?
No, they had a ship that sailed
More like a ferry or a barge.
A boat that came up to Alaska.
A little bit more than a kayak, but
I was thinking of like the big cruise.
Yeah.
Oh no! It'd be more like a schooner. But they came up, and they were fresh newlyweds, and they landed in Valdez, Port of Valdez, and they worked there at a children's home or a
orphanage,
children's home, orphanage, and then they started moving north. They went to Anchorage.
Well, they were in Copper Center region first I think at Chistochina, doing some church planting, kind of in cooperation with Vince Joy, I think.
The Gillespies and the Joys worked together and were partners. And one of the things that Johnny and Nadine realized was that there were a lot of missionaries, just random people who came and wanted to bring the light of the gospel to Alaska, and they realized that there was a person here, a family there, a family there. There wasn't any
collaboration.
There's no collaboration. There was no unity. There's no kindred relationship. And so when they went to, they ended up in Anchorage, where they started the Church of the Open Door. And they started realizing that there are missionaries that need that collaboration so that they can be able to stay in their areas of where they've been called. And so they got together and got a bunch of them together and had times for them to get together and enjoy one another. And then they eventually started InterAct. It started as Alaska Missions. And it was that for a couple of years until they realized that there was already an Alaska Missions down in Homer. And they said, okay, we got to change the name. They changed it to Arctic Missions.
Yeah.
And that was the same time that Vince Joy started Central Alaska Missions. And the two organizations, and I think part of the dialogue at that time was also looking at, there were denominations that had been assigned to the various regions in Alaska, but the needs were so great in the villages that I think as people were standing on the outside looking, became so much emphasis on medical help and educational help that the gospel wasn't being proclaimed as widely as the independent missionaries felt. So
doing pretty good with meeting physical needs, but not the gospel itself.
Yeah, well, because one of the things is when you're developing, if you want to go into ministry, if you want to go into missions, you need to come into missions with the idea that relationship is absolutely essential. And you need to address the felt needs of people as much as the spiritual needs of the people. And it's not that they had anything, they weren't missing the gospel. They were doing the gospel message as well, but they were living the gospel out and helping as much as they can with the physical needs and that kind of thing. And then they ended up developing groups of local people who they were able to, through their relationship, were able to lead to Christ. And then they would start discipling them, and then those would gather together and form what Scripture calls the church, the body of Christ. But
I think early on, in those very early years, when Central Alaska Missions was formalized as an organization and Arctic Missions formalized, there was those two organizations particularly worked very closely together. And in fact, for decades held an annual conference together.
Collaborated heavily.
And they basically like picked different regions, right? Yeah. So I think Central Alaska Missions was like Glen Allen, Valdez, and then
up to Tok. Well,
Tok and
up to Northway.
Northway.
That whole region.
So like Eastern Alaska, and then like I was going to say InterAct, but Arctic Missions, because that's what it was.
Yeah.
Took more Central Alaska.
Right. Yeah. The interior.
Although we did have people down on the Aleutian chain eventually as well.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think there was just a lot of ongoing dialogue between the two organizations, and Vince Joy and Johnny Gillespie were in some ways very, very similar. They were visionaries, always moving ahead to develop new things. And so early on, Central Alaska Missions, they wanted to formalize a training program for Alaska Native people. So Alaska Bible College was born in Glen Ellen, and that was its focus. About those same times, InterAct was, well, early on, John and Nadine helped establish Victory Bible Camp,
which was Victory High School. Victory High School.
There was both, right?
Yeah, I remember.
So we had a boarding school there, and in fact, our good friend in Canada, the previous chief of our reserve in Canada, went to Victory High School for a period of time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a lot of fun layovers, because when InterAct decided they were going to start working in Canada, our Sidaldale Reserve was the first place that they went to.
Wow.
So in a sense, it felt like coming home when we went there.
Yeah.
But and then InterAct, as the high school's running, they realized, okay, well, what is going to be after high school? Like, what have we got for them? So Arctic Bible Institute was launched. That was a 4-year training program, but different than the Bible College. It wasn't a credentialed.
And it started at Victory Bible Camp or Victory High School in Glacier View community.
At the camp.
At the camp.
And then fast forward a few years, and the state developed the foster care program, and so all of the orphanages and children's homes were closing. And so the one that was up on Lazy Mountain, which actually was run by the Hughes family. So Kenny and Janetta were...
Kenny Jr.
Yeah. Yes. They were... Soon after that became InterAct missionaries, and Kenny was our crazy, larger-than-life pilot, etc.
If you know Dwayne King, he was the InterAct's version of Dwayne King.
Yeah, you said
they were good friends.
Maybe we shouldn't say this, but I'm going to say it. He's the Dwayne King of InterAct.
Yes, larger than life. You can say his name, and anybody that knew him, it
just love
brings
him.
A smile to your face.
Yes.
So InterAct was gifted, or at that point it was Arctic Missions, was gifted the Lazy Mountain Children's Home campus. And eventually that became, well, that was our office for many years, a field office for many years. But then they had a broadcasting ministry up there as well, that the Hammonds, some people would remember John and Norma Hammond, they were, and others were kind of facilitating that. Phil and Margie Cobb were involved with that for a period of time. And then they moved Arctic Bible Institute from Victory and moved it up to the Lazy Mountain campus. And it ran as a 4-year Bible school until 1992. I think we were already in Canada when that, just lack of enrollment.
Yeah.
So that closed. And then in 2013 was when Alaska Bible College moved to Palmer. And the first year that they ran, they didn't have a dorm. So we, on the campus, we were back by then, and they used our housing on campus for the dorm.
Wow.
For that first year. Actually, the first 2 years.
Yeah, and now you're based primarily out of Palmer. That's like your home base on the Lazy Mountain campus.
Yeah, the Lazy Mountain campus is basically the Alaska headquarters.
Yeah.
The Alaska office.
And you were telling me you recently founded a what do you call it, like a thrift store, some kind of, and you found like the skin of an.
Oh yeah. Well, we're always looking for historical things, and Phil Cobb actually is the one that founded it. Was at the Alaska Pickers down in Palmer when they were in business, and he walked by and he saw that and he went, "That's," and then he started looking at it and flipped it over, and it was the skin off of their, I think it was a 182 or something like that. I think that was the first one they had,
Wow.
or something like that. But it had Alaska Missions on it, and it had the Alaska Missions logo.
Wow.
And so it was framed. And so he bought that.
Yeah.
And we have it up at the campus, and it's on the wall.
And you mentioned too, I want to ask you about this, that over there at the Lazy Mountain, there was an orphanage.
Yes.
Right?
It started out as the Lazy Mountain Children's Home.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that went away because the foster system was established in Alaska.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
But you were saying you've had elders come by that facility or the where the location is.
Yes.
And they were children there.
Yes.
So tell me about some of those.
Well, we being up there, it's really kind of fun because we lived up there, and we would see cars come in. They would park up right by there, and beautiful views. Oh my goodness!
Mm-hmm.
You just, it's $1 million view up there.
Yeah.
It's just absolutely gorgeous up there. And these guys would stand outside their car, and I'd see them out there. So I'd walk out there, and they would get maybe a little nervous, because they didn't know me.
Yeah.
And so I'd start talking with them, and I'd invite them to come into the building.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to hear their story. Tell
Right.
me your story. Tell me about this place. I want to know about this place. They'd walk in there, and I had elders walk in there, and they would break down and weep, and they'd say, "This place saved my life. I'm alive today because this place saved my life." And it was the missionaries that came that were taking care of the felt needs and the real needs of people, and sharing the love of Christ with them. As they built those relationships, they shared the love of Christ, and they would come, and we've had events there that we've had, and people would come and they would sing, and they've been in ministry their whole life because of the start that they got at Lazy Mountain Children's Home. And they'd tell us stories of hiking up Lazy Mountain, and tell us stories of milking cows and feeding pigs and feeding chickens, and just loving the time there. But when they came up with the foster care system, then there was no need for these orphanages, because they were foster care out.
Makes you wonder what's better. Is it foster care or
there's advantages to both, and there's some disadvantages. Yes, that's true. But the reality is it happened. And so God in his sovereignty moved things from one space to the next. And I think a lot of it has to do with what we were talking about before, about learning to trust. How do you learn to trust? You learn to trust by being confronted with difficulty, and then saying, I will go to where I will have more peace. And if I go to the cross, I'm going to have more peace, and God will not necessarily make my life better, but I will learn to trust him, and I'll have way more peace.
I think it's profound that God provided InterAct the blessing of this property that is filled with godly heritage to the kids that live there, to the children that live there. And we have one woman in particular. She lives on Lazy Mountain, not far from our campus, and she grew up there as a child. And she runs one of the ministries that happens twice a year at the campus.
Wow.
And impacts the lives of others. But it's just, what a blessing. I mean, for us to be able to see God continue to use that campus for his ministry. It's a rich heritage to have.
Yeah, something special. You're standing on the on the shoulders of others.
Yes. Giants. The standing on the shoulders of giants. I think of some of the people, the heroes of InterAct's history.
Gail and Jeannie Van Diest, Bob and Carol Moffat. There's just
there's so many.
There's so many. I hate to even mention a few because you got the Morgans
and the Stumps
and the Hughes and
we will miss somebody. The Richardsons. I mean, the names will just keep coming.
Yeah.
At the point that we joined InterAct in '88, I think InterAct had probably 60 to 75 missionary units just in Alaska. And
Really?
I mean, at that point, InterAct was also involved in both Siberia and, well, no, we joined, not yet, but Canada for sure, Western Canada.
And they were taking missionaries from Alaska and moving into Canada because there was a great need in Canada.
Yeah.
And so there's ministry going on in Western Canada.
Well, now it's all over Canada. But.
Yeah, the Western Canada takes a lot of Canada.
Yeah, it's a huge place, that Canada.
Yeah, if you're standing on the eastern shore, everything's west.
Right. Yes. So tell me about in the late 80s, the Iron Curtain in Russia comes down, and InterAct makes its move. Tell me
Jill,
about
why don't you
I
tell?
will.
Yeah, because she loves telling the story.
So we were at Victory Bible Camp as staff, and the church at that point it was Spring Creek Bible Church. Now it's Glacier View, same church. Were invited to come down to Lazy Mountain Bible Church, where Bob Lee was pastor, for a night of prayer. Now that the Iron Curtain the Berlin Wall is down, and the wall has come down, and Russia is wide open for all kinds of ministry. And so we joined. I mean, the sanctuary was cram packed. I think there must have been, I don't know how many churches gathered there, but we spent a night in prayer. I know that Dwayne King was there.
The champion for Siberia.
I don't want to interrupt your story. Just a comment is that this idea that these ministries begin with prayer. I think that's a very important.
Absolutely.
This night of prayer that you're referring to is so important, that the Lord honors prayer, and that any ministry you want to do ought to be launched with prayer.
If it's not launched with prayer, it's doomed for difficulty.
Wow, interesting you say that.
Yeah. It needs to be launched and bathed, and not only just launched, but bathed in prayer.
Well, and prayer is one of the, I'm such a practical person, and prayer doesn't feel practical.
Right.
Sitting there with your eyes closed talking, I'm a man, I want action. But prayer is action. It's actually the launch pad.
Crying out to God and with your hands open, saying, take whatever you will.
Well, and it's believing too that any ministry is an action of the Holy Spirit on others.
Yeah.
And so you have to, that's what you were appealing to.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, I'm sorry, Jill.
Yeah.
No, that was good.
Yeah.
I love hearing
Good
your question. Yeah. This story. Go ahead.
It was so much fun. We spent the night in prayer, but also there was afterwards just a lot of what ifs, like what could we be doing? What could we be doing? And I think that night was a part of the catalyst. Maybe Dwayne would have, his story, other parts that also came together, but where Dwayne was over there and InterAct did an exploration time in Yakutsk, the capital of Yakutia, one of the provinces. And that
you're talking about Siberia.
I'm talking about Siberia, yeah. And that was where, and then Dave and Kay Henry, who were serving with InterAct, who originally were Wycliffe missionaries, and then they joined InterAct. They were fluent in the language. I think it was Koyukon. I may have that wrong. But the languages in indigenous Siberia were similar enough. The structure was similar enough that they felt like, okay, we want to be the first ones going. And I think they were our first missionaries going. And InterAct, Dwayne was there doing all kinds of things. So there was there was just a lot of ministry effort happening in Russia and in Siberia. But I would say both Kingdom Air Corps, because at that point that was formalized, and InterAct, the focus was on indigenous people groups, not just the Russians. And because the language base was so similar, that gave Dave and Kay Henry a really good head start because they could already communicate with the Sakha people. Wow. The languages were similar enough.
And I read on your website that InterAct has partnered with something called the Institute of the Bible Translation to help fund the translation of the scriptures into Sakha
and Tuvan. I think both.
And Buryat as well.
And Buryat.
And these are indigenous Siberian languages.
Yep. And there's over 12,000 different communities that don't have a gospel presence, don't have a gospel
In
presence at all.
Siberia,
In Siberia, 12,000.
that's not people, that's communities.
That's communities, 12,000 villages that don't have.
Like today, right now.
Today, right now.
Wow.
Right now. As a matter of fact, they've never heard, as far as we know, they've never heard of the name Christ. And just a tremendous need there.
That's so interesting because I always hear about like the jungles of Amazon, and of course there's need there. I always hear about Indonesia. I've never heard of this kind of talk with Siberia.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because I live in too small a bubble or something, but yeah, that's fascinating.
Well, Siberia is gigantic. Yakutia is huge.
Yeah.
Just gigantic. It's the northern and westernmost province of Russia.
And then we had a number of other missionaries from Alaska that then went over. Some of them started with Slavic gospel and then
over as teachers.
Joined InterAct. And we've got one couple, the Stiefels, they were in Yakutia, but they were further north.
They were way north in
the people.
With the Aven people.
So they were there, and we have one couple who started in Alaska, and then they moved to Canada. They were one of the transplants over to Canada as InterAct started developing ministries there. And so Mike was field director in Canada, and then they went to Siberia, where he was the field director there, and now they're back here. But just a lot of effort and crossover with missionaries going over to Siberia. And
the reason for that is because the language groups, we're working with a language group, and that whole, if you call it the ring of fire, Siberia, Alaska, Western Canada is the ring of fire.
Yeah, there's actually a volcano that's ready to blow 85 miles. Have you seen that?
Yeah,
we were watching that.
Yeah, we're watching that.
Because our family were wanting to get.
We're gonna get snow this year. It sounds like, but it'll be gray.
It'll be gray snow.
When readout went off when we were here at Victory, and it was like, for anybody that reads Narnia, it was like in the last battle, that black cloud that came and covered everything. Well, it was just a huge black cloud. We could see it coming up the Matanuska Valley, up the river, following the river. And it I have a jar full of that silt that I kept.
When was that?
90 or 90s? No, it was the early 90s.
Early 90s.
Well, Mount Spur went off later. This was readout. I've drug that stupid silt from
she's got a
Alaska to Illinois to Wisconsin to Canada back to Alaska.
We went out into the tundra and she took a jar and we scraped a bunch of the ash off the leaves and into it's just nothing but ash.
I've got speaking of bunny trails, a friend of mine and I have been scoping out Redoubt because there is some fallout from that eruption. There's like this field from I think it's like a mud field. It's not really lava. It seems like it's mud.
I think it's
but
mud.
Like this was pre the eruption in the 90s. But the astronauts who trained for the Apollo missions went there to simulate walking on the dust.
I did not know that.
And that's where they did it. And so there are some airstrips you can land on over there. So another pilot friend of mine are gonna try to get over there and check it out.
Oh, that's so cool.
Man, it's such a bunny trail, but it's fun. I'm enjoying you guys. We both have kids, and we're realizing we don't have enough fun in Alaska. Part of coming to Alaska is having fun here. Yeah. We're like, man, we've been all business. Like all of our flights have just been like for like these big ministry purposes. And we're like, we're craving fun. So he and I started talking, and that's one of the things we're going to do to have fun.
Oh, that would be really cool.
Yes.
That'd be way too much fun.
Not for me.
Maybe too much, but it'd be really, 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 really fun.
Yes. Well, in that Spur Mountain, it's got a little smoke coming out of it, and I really want to fly over it,
We can see it from the campus.
Yeah. And
when it's venting and the conditions are clear enough. Now today it's pretty hazy, but we can stand just outside the office and we can see it when it's venting.
Yeah.
And
so fun.
we when we fly to Chignik Bay or Perryville, we fly that direction. We fly over that way, and we fly right by the mountain, and you can see it venting as you're flying over it. It's just like, oh, this is real.
Actually, when we were here before, somehow people were not as wise about the issue with volcanic ash, because that same day that we were watching the cloud come up, and everybody's getting masks on and staying inside and not driving their vehicles and stuff. Well, a 747 was on its way back from probably Seattle.
Serious.
And one minute they're flying along, and the next minute they have no engines.
It turned to glass.
It completely shut down.
This happened at the Redoubt explosion?
Yeah. Yes. It shut down all the engines, and I don't know how many thousand feet they
were they okay? I mean,
descended. Yeah, the engine started again.
Engine started again.
And then they landed. But can you imagine how terrifying
yes
that would be?
I have actually had my engine stop before in the plane. But fortunately, it started again. But
isn't it called? Don't you practice that? It's called a stall.
No, it's different than a stall.
It's like panic.
But your heart, like you just get this sink in your heart. I was flying the other day. It was a night flight, and we were flying home, and I had passengers and everything, and the engine didn't die, but it just and I think I had some icing. So when I heard that, I immediately pulled carb heat. I turned on my fuel pump and I pushed the mixture all the way in, and it never happened again. But still, when you're flying over the tundra, we were actually near Big Lake at the time, so I turned the plane to fly over the lake, because if we did lose the engine, I could land on the lake. It's frozen now, so. But you have that moment where your heart just goes boom.
Yeah.
Especially when you have passenger. I was flying with some friends.
I don't love flying.
Well, that's why I like flying Send North's plane. The
Bonanza.
It's got a weeping wing.
That's a nice.
The ice and we've used it, and it's nice having that.
Yes,
it's nice having that.
Yeah. Well, flying always it does comes with its risks, and it has great rewards. And all these accidents lately, when all these accidents lately have happened, people have written me and said, "Are you okay? Or you weren't on that plane, were you?" Because they know I fly and stuff.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, it's concerning. It is making me double check the plane before.
And talking with our pilot, our master pilot. I rely on him, and we rely on him to say, "Hey, fly or don't fly, you tell me."
Yeah.
And remember, you got 5 kids.
Yeah,
we had some appointees that are raising funds to come up, and they came up for kind of a vision quest for a couple of weeks, and they were finally able to fly to Ruby. They weren't able to get to the other villages that was the original plan because of weather. And they were disappointed. We're like, you wanted to know what ministry is like in Alaska. This is real ministry.
Yeah.
Maybe you go, maybe you don't. Well, a helicopter had some problems and
landed on a road in Ruby.
A very hard landing in Ruby. And then they had the plane all ready to go. And then they went out, and just this ice fog had gone through. And it was like 2 inches of ice. Yeah. So they're chipping off all of that. Jonathan's got the hairdryer out there on this airfield in the middle of nowhere.
Hairdryer and a generator. That's great.
They made it back.
Yeah.
Yeah, living out here long enough, you start producing those kinds of stories.
Yeah.
And that's part of the history too. The difficulties in reaching the remote areas of Alaska that absolutely deserve the gospel. I mean, Christ died for them as well, and who's going to bring that message? But the missionaries that God calls. To do the task. And not everybody's called to do it. Not everybody's called to be a missionary, but the Christian world is called to have a missionary heart.
Yeah. And when I think back over InterAct's history on at least 2 of the fields. I don't know about, well, no, hard things have happened in Siberia as well. But I mean, we've had missionaries that were in Alaska in interior villages that people have lost family members because they couldn't get a flight out and needed emergency services.
And we've got missionaries that have had children that have passed away in the village. And I just saw a Facebook post about one of our missionaries, the Van Dietz family, and they showed a picture of the grave where one of their children had drowned, and they showed a picture of that grave and said, "This is why we love the Mr. Van and Jeannie."
Well, and I think Shirley and Morgan. He was principal of the Victory High School and drowned in the Matanuska. Wow. And I mean, they had small children. And some people will know Adele and Alan Morgan. Adele is Kenny's daughter, and Kenny Hughes's daughter, and Alan is a Morgan. So it was his father that passed away, and yet both families continued to serve the Lord. And Alan and Adele are very active in ministry here in Alaska.
You mentioned too that the Pence family was with InterAct, so Dave Pence.
Dave Pence,
and I know they lost a child on a boat accident on their way to a village or something. Wow. So the risks and the danger are real, and you have seen some of the tragedies, and one of the
that's part of the developing trust in the Lord. God has called Jill and I to InterAct Ministries and to Alaska. We feel there's no question that we have been called here. And has it been easy? No, it hasn't. There's been all kinds of difficulties, and difficulties come from within the family of God and from outside. But you know what? God is faithful, and if we listen to God, and if we are obedient to His word, then it won't go easy for us. And it won't be that we won't have difficulties. But there's a purpose for it. And if we can seek the purpose, say, how can I be more like Christ? That's what the whole goal is. And we want to glorify God. The chief purpose of man is to glorify God. And that's what we want to do in everything that we do. That's what InterAct Ministries Alaska wants to do. That's what InterAct Ministries Inc., which is the global InterAct Ministries, all 3 fields, that's what we want to accomplish.
So give me a summary of, we'll kind of wrap up here soon, but give me a summary of what's happening right now with InterAct. Just do a brush overview. So whoever's listening, or they might be thinking, oh man, I'm thinking about missions in Alaska, maybe InterAct. What does InterAct look like today in Alaska?
In Alaska, we have right now, I've got a list in my office of 11 different villages that have asked us for and has said we would love to have a missionary come.
Wow.
And we've got another 3 or 4 that have been talking about it and saying, how can we get someone? And most of the ones that we've got are where InterAct has been before in the past. And so they're asking for someone to come and minister God's word to them and share God's word and help the church in the villages grow and become.
That's really fascinating that you have such a list, because if you talk to certain people, they might say the impression is that villages have seen missionaries come and go, and it's almost like something they tolerate rather than something that they're asking for. So that's fascinating.
Yeah, because here's the thing. Our heart, and we are looking, we need missionaries. The scripture says the fields are white with harvest, and the laborers are few. That's true here, and that's what we're looking for. Is we're looking for missionaries, people who have been called by God, and it can be all age groups. It can be young all the way to those that are retired, and looking for another thing to do. But there's some training that needs to happen, because you can't go into a community and bring the way you organize your life, the way you see the way things ought to be done and should be done, your worldview, as it were. You can't go. What you need to do is you need to come in and learn from them. Who are they? What questions are they asking? Because if we go in there and answer the questions we're asking, it may or may not be what they're asking. And so there's some training that needs to take place. But you need to go in with a desire to be there for the rest of your life.
I think that's one of the things when we moved back up here to try to kind of revitalize things. We've started some ministries that take place on the campus, but in general, we knew with a small team that we were working with that one of the things the field needed was a redevelopment of infrastructure and support that was contextualized to the environment now, which is different than 50 years ago when InterAct was here. And so we spent quite a few years just building that kind of infrastructure so that we could fully support our missionaries that are out in villages. And at our heart, we are still about church planting. So anything that happens at our campus has to in some way support or enhance that effort of church planting in the villages. And we've got a member care system, and I think that's one of the strengths of our field now. There's a leadership team and a support team that are able to fully support our missionaries that are out in villages. And then, Steve, you talked about the training. That was another area that we realized, okay, so how are we going to equip them, and how do we take InterAct's core values of relationship and scripture and prayer and all of those things working cross-culturally? How do we equip new missionaries who, they've gone to Bible school, but it's general knowledge. We want this to become a specific, for them to go in as learners that are fully equipped to enjoy learning the culture, enjoy and know how to learn how the people think, so that as they're sharing scripture, they're sharing it in a way that speaks to the heart of those people, which is different village to village and context to context. And so we've got some training programs almost fully ready to launch, some that we have launched, so that all of our missionaries are getting 12 plus weeks of very intentional training in how to get at that level of understanding of a culture.
So someone is like, hey, I'm interested in InterAct. They might come and spend 12 weeks in Palmer, for example, getting some of that information.
Specialized training that would help them in their sharing of the gospel, because it's important to not only have that training, but that support is necessary as well. If you look at from a military standpoint, how many servicemen does it take to support one infantryman in the field?
Right.
It takes a lot.
We don't have that many, but
we don't have ratios like 10 to 1.
Yeah.
But you think about even supporters, churches are praying, so that adds quite a.
That's part of the support structure we're talking about. Because we're looking for missionaries who are looking for partners to enable them to go out in the field.
We want them to know also how to use scripture to speak into the lives of the people that they're serving, to be able to be competent in helping them as crises arise, because they do in all of our lives. And so that's another part of the training. And I think just at the heart, we've actually, it was Jim Stamberg from Send that at one point said, well, how are we different? How are the two organizations different? And so that really got us thinking. And as a team, we we wrestled with that. Like, what is InterAct called to do? And we have a motto that we want to be. We don't care about just being a presence. That's not what we're called to do. We want to be in a community, so involved in that community that we can go deep into the life of the community and the lives of the people.
We'd rather be a mile wide. We'd rather be an inch wide and a mile deep than a mile wide and an inch deep.
Yes, I like that.
And there's nothing wrong with being, a mile wide and an inch deep. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. Not at all. But that's not what we were called to do.
That's not going to be the ethos of.
This is not why. That's not why we're here. What we're doing. And so we have basically two different ideologies that work together. They're all one. They're one that's like a monorail, but it's powered by two different polarities, maybe. But one is ministering at the worldview level, at the heart level, at the deep heart level,
which takes time,
and using Scripture as the antidote to the problems and ills of life, primarily because there's all kinds of things that can happen medically speaking. Most of the things that happen medically speaking, not all of them, but most of them, are there to kind of take care of the symptoms and kind of reduce the symptoms so that other things can happen. What we want to do is say, okay, well, let's do the other things that can happen. It's okay to use the therapies that they have, but what really changes the heart of man is the Word of God. And so how do we take and learn the heart of man and then be able to apply the biblical narrative that addresses that issue so that the Holy Spirit of God can change their heart, not us. That's why we say we're diving deep into discipleship, heart by heart and community by community. Because here's what happens. It's the heart that changes, and it's the group that changes, and it's the church that changes the communities we live in.
And I think none of that happens without missionaries that want to love the people. And I think if there's one attribute that has kept us with InterAct, it is that value of people, and that we've heard so many stories from different villages and different people that we know, different Alaska Native people that are good friends. That's the good stories that come out that, well, we knew that these people loved us. Well, we knew that these people really loved us. And I think if without that characteristic, the gospel's just more information.
Yeah. And like you said, it takes time too. Like I know people in the villages have seen a lot of people come and go. And there's almost like a testing period.
Oh, yeah.
And you know about that, where they kind of almost make it difficult on the missionary just to see, are you really
staying?
Let's speed this up. I'm going to make life a little hard on you. Or, they do little things. Yeah. And that's not to knock them, but it's like they have a history. They want to know if you're for real.
Yeah.
And I get people coming in and doing short-term missions and things like that. But what InterAct found years ago when they did a survey of the Native Church, or the believers, the Alaska Native believers, did a survey and asked what's most needed, and they said we need to have some missionaries that are buried in our cemeteries, which means we need to have some missionaries that want to be here so badly that they stay, so I don't want to sound mean or inappropriate, but the idea of flying in, landing, doing a 1-week program, and then be airlifted out, while it does have some benefits, the long-lasting benefits is what happens after they're gone, and who's going to stay. Because and I get it, I get that I've talked to a lot of the Native communities that get so tired having groups drop in and drop in and drop in. When, are they going to come back? No, they're not going to come back. So why would I spend the time getting to know them and go all the emotional equity that it takes?
Right.
Why would I do that if they're not going to come back?
Right. Yeah, it makes sense.
So there needs to be some work. And one of the things that we're looking at right now, who's best equipped to reach into the Alaska Native villages than the church on the road system, the church of the Alaskan churches that can help. Now, I'm not saying that we don't take people from the lower 48. Yeah. No, not at all.
Yeah.
But it's a combination of both, and it's exciting to see some of the churches saying we want to be. How can we be a part of solving some of the problems?
Well, I'm glad you said that, just because in this last year of my time here in Alaska, I've kind of adopted that. What you're talking about is getting local church involvement with missions. And my wife and I talk about all the time, because when we lived in Mexico, in the bigger cities, there was these, Baptist, evangelical Mexican churches. And we kept asking ourselves, why do we need to be here? There's churches right there full of believers. And so we always talked about that when we were in Mexico. Then we come here, and there's almost that same question. Why did I need to come here?
Yeah.
There's all these churches in Wasilla and Anchorage and in Fairbanks, all these bigger towns. And we don't need outside people. They're already here. We just need to mobilize them.
But you see, who calls us to the field? Isn't it the Holy Spirit of God that lays it on our heart? Doesn't God call us to do that? So it's His business, not ours. So whether you come from Michigan or whatever, it is not the issue. Has God called you for this purpose and to this place? And am I going to answer that call and be obedient to God's call on my life? Not everybody's called. Everybody's called to ministry, but not everybody's called to be a missionary.
Sure. Sure.
And I think one of the challenges is we've seen, since we've been back, and I'm sure this has happened before. Well, this is why InterAct and Central Alaska Missions, or SEND, originally started, because there were a significant number of independent missionaries that, yes, they had supporting churches somewhere who didn't know anything about the Alaskan context, but they were largely not accountable to anybody. They didn't have a support structure. And we see the same thing now, where there are people that feel called and they go out without any equipping. Like, just going to Moody Bible and doing a Bible degree doesn't necessarily equip you to be in small village Alaska with the kinds of training that you need to have. And so I think that's one of the things we think is important for churches that want to be a part of reaching into their own state. They have to somehow either partner with mission organizations or somehow be open to getting that kind of training for the people that they're sending out, so that we're not just continuing to do some of the same things where,
like, making the same mistakes.
Planes land, people get out, they do their thing, they do the same thing they would have done in Anchorage, they do their thing, and then they leave. Well, that's not helping. Sometimes it's hurting. And so we feel, we've invested a lot of years on our own learning and getting training and finding the right training when InterAct didn't have some of that. So I think that's a challenge and an opportunity.
It's just coming to my mind now. It's just an interesting thought, as for an organization with the depth of knowledge and experience like InterAct to offer something to local churches. Hey, we're interested in doing something, but we don't know what to do.
That's interesting.
Can we spend a weekend with you in Palmer?
We've talked about that with our training director. And as they're finalizing the Etana training, that maybe we also offer this as like a couple of weekend courses for churches in Alaska or anywhere that want this kind of training to be able to
Well, I would love
forward in
to connect
missions.
with you more and talk more about that.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And here's how it's supposed to work. The local church sends missionaries. InterAct Ministry is not a sending organization.
Mm.
It's a deploying organization.
Mm-hmm.
It's a receiving organization. But the local church sends those who have been called to missions on their behalf.
Mm-hmm.
And we then receive them, train them, equip them, then we deploy them, and we help support and structure. But
And hold them accountable.
and hold them accountable. And it's under the authority of the local church. I mean, the local church has got, we're not the local church. InterAct Ministries is not the local church.
Mm-hmm.
We work with the local church to use their assets to accomplish the task of bringing the gospel of Jesus Christ. And in our context, it's to the Alaska least reached people groups.
Mm.
Once our missionaries are deployed to wherever we're placing them, they have a mentor the first year that meets with them every week, and into 2 years if needed. We've done 2 years. They have, if they are actively doing church planting, then they are also going to be getting field consultation visits. The field director goes out twice and meets with them twice a year to set 6-month goals. But the
training director goes out and helps them work through the process of understanding the culture and understanding the people, so that they can develop develop training times, develop teaching, develop preaching subjects that will meet the need of that particular people group where they're at, so that we're not answering questions they're not even asking.
Yeah. And so there's just a continuous flow of follow-up and staying in touch and meeting, because if you're in an isolated village, needs come up. A break. Just when I lived in Mexico in villages, sometimes I just wanted to watch a movie. Just things like that.
Let me just go get a pizza and watch a movie. And that's why we have our support. We have a support branch of our team that does that,
and a member care
for those who just need. One of the things is there's traumatic things that happen in the village all the time, and the numbing regularity of some of those things that plague some of our communities. You get completely drained by it. So who do we have to help restore those who are restoring those in the community? So we have a support structure. We have missionaries that live in the bush, and they need to make a annual order of food. Well, okay, normally would they come in then and spend 2 weeks putting together a barge load? No, all they have to do is send us a list of what they need. We'll go out, shop, get it, pack it up, get it all packed
to the barge
properly, get it to the barge, get it loaded on into the things for the barge, and then the barge would take it out, and they would just receive it. And then we, hopefully, if it worked out right, then we could be there to help them unload it. And help them split wood and help them take care of some of those things that gives them more energy and more time to spend loving on the people that they've been called to love on.
And I think that also points to a possible practical thing for Alaskan local churches to be involved with.
Absolutely.
Is things like that. So like if they come to you and say, well, what can we do? You're like, well, gosh, we need someone to make this barge order. We need to send 2 strong guys out there to unload it or whatever.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be like an InterAct person. It can be like, someone from the church down the road. And have those relationships.
And there's some organization in Alaska now that helps with that.
Is that Arctic
Barnabas? And we talk with Rob Bearden all the time. And not only that, we got MARC down in Soldotna that are wonderful people that absolutely adore the people of Alaska and want to help missionaries as best they can.
We just had some of our missionaries that had to be out for some appointments, and they were out for about 6 weeks. And one of the churches had a couple. I don't even remember how we connected with them.
Through
Rob, I think. And so they sent one of their former pastors, and his wife went out and did a couple of weeks of pulpit supply for our couple that were gone. It was perfect because it was such short notice that all the people that maybe would have been able to go couldn't. So,
well, I even have some my friends who go to my little Baptist church down the road here. They have an Airbnb, and they have 4 beautiful cabins on a creek, just beautiful.
Oh.
And they're like, do you know anyone who might want to stay here? They will free nights. They will offer a vehicle.
That's awesome.
And they're just craving to give.
That's really good to know. We have started building a resource bank of things like that.
Okay.
So
I will hook you up.
Yeah, do that.
Because we have the camp
for all of our.
I understand.
Up at the InterAct campus, we have several apartments, several buildings that are designated for missionaries that need a place to stay, people that are affiliated with ministry work. We have and they come and they can stay there. And we have a place in Anchorage, right 5 minutes from Anchorage International Airport.
There you go.
And we pick missionaries up at the airport all the time.
And for their getaway to Maui.
Yeah.
For a break.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And if they need it, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so they can come and stay in a beautiful they can stay in a beautiful place.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of that that we can do.
But sometimes we have, it's good for us to have other resources on a resource bank. We had that in Canada where we had just built here are some places where somewhere in Washington, somewhere in BC, somewhere in Alberta, where facilities are open to missionaries staying. Because sometimes people, we've had times where either the campus has been full or the Anchorage apartment has been booked.
It is.
So it's good to have
it is
options.
amazing that the resources for that kind of thing, they're out there, and the obstacle is just making the connection.
Yeah, just knowing.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, guys, I know you have somewhere to be.
We do.
Yeah, and so we'll wrap it up here. This was such an engaging conversation, and even in the midst of while recording, I was like, oh, we need to connect a little bit and connect some dots. So we will do that. Thank you for coming on and sharing all of this. We went on some great bunny trails. I enjoyed our bunny trails.
Yeah,
it's fun.
I don't know how
I'm beagle, so I like chasing bunnies.
Just like that dog on Up.
Yeah,
I love that one.
Yeah.
Clearly, we need to get together with you guys again.
Oh, I'd love that.
Yeah,
not on the podcast, but
not
just
on a podcast.
fun. How many
just the fun.
Speaking of fun, I want more of that in Alaska. I haven't done enough of it. I have a list of fun on my phone that I have plans for.
Sometimes we've fun. What do we do for fun? We just work.
Well, and yes, that's true, but the old saying is that if you love what you're doing, you'll never work a day in your life.
Yeah.
And we just absolutely love. I wouldn't change a thing that we've been through.
Yeah.
Because of where God has brought me to this point. I wouldn't have said that maybe necessarily 10 years ago.
When you're at that rock bottom, you're not saying
I'm not saying that. You say, please get me out of this.
Yes.
But I wouldn't change anything right now. Now, if I get in a deep hole tomorrow, I might not be saying that. But I hope you would remember what you said.
I'll hold you to it.
We are really hoping and trying to schedule so that in August, after we have some family coming up after our annual conference, but I think we're going to be able to get in the truck and camper and drive down and visit everybody in Canada. We have not been back for 6 years, way too long.
That just sounds like a delight.
Oh, I'm so looking forward to that.
It would be such an enjoyable time.
Yeah.
Now, you guys are about to head out to something called Native Musicale.
Yes.
Native Musicale.
What is that? I know you got to go like 10 minutes
Okay,
ago.
it started back in the early 70s, I think. Don Stump was really kind of got going on, and then Don and Edna Shugak with Alaska Freedom Journey are now running it. They're running that, and it's
So what is it like? It's like a cultural news, like, or like
it's
talent
Christian.
show.
It's the church. It's the believers from villages from all over Alaska come, and they sign up and they get 15 minutes to stand up on the stage and share songs, share some some of their favorite gospel songs, and share testimonies and stuff like that, just to glorify God in their own unique way.
A lot of singing in their own language.
Oh my goodness.
It's been different things over different years. Like early on, they would sometimes also do day things, Bible studies or special events. Since we have been back up here, some years Alaska Freedom Journey has kind of facilitated a gathering of Native and missionary leaders, and we've had some really good dialogue for that. Kieran Kloss was up here one year and was a part of some of those. And so it is, I think, so typically Native because it is like originally all these people were coming in to sell furs at the fur rendezvous. So people were coming in from villages. So Anchorage becomes the gathering place. And so it is a Alaska Native gathering. So if you want to visit with people, man, that's the place to be. And it's so much fun.
So much fun.
So much
and
fun.
that's where you're going like right now.
Yeah. We're going to set up.
We have a display table.
We put out, and we're going to just be there every night.
We've got some
tonight and through Friday.
Yeah, we've got some flyers we're going to be running an a women's retreat on our campus in April, which we haven't done since 2020. It's been, or maybe it was 2019, 2021. Anyway, it's been a long time since we've hosted that. So we've got that kind of ramping back up some of the things that InterAct used to run. And we'll have flyers we have a support network for Christian educators out in villages. It's called the Alaska Christian Educators Network. So we've got flyers for that. We have a small group of teachers that are joining us once a month on these Zoom meetings, but it hasn't really grown much this year. So we really want to grow that. And at face value, it's nothing but a way to support educators that are out in villages so that they have both we have topics that are on educational strategies for multi-grade classrooms and the context that they find in village schools. And we have missiological discussions about how do you, in fact, this next week is our March one, and it's going to be looking at Dwight Homestead, who is living in Palmer, but he's our speaker, and he'll be talking about how do you have biblical boundaries so that you're establishing healthy relationships in a village context.
Man, a friend of mine she works in the school system, the Alaska's public school system in the villages, and I've asked her about trying to find the right person to interview about this is a huge thing. The school system, the teachers, it's hard to keep teachers out there. It's hard to get good teachers, all those things. And man, I really want to find someone I can talk to and learn about it for this show. So another dot, maybe you and I can connect.
Yes. Yeah. We've kind of taken some of what we saw working in Canada.
Okay.
In our school system, the context is the same.
Yeah.
I mean, the specifics are different country to country, but otherwise everything is exactly the same. And so this network is this is step one toward eventually we want to be able to host an educational conference every year. And then we also have a side ramp where if somebody says, and we have one teacher that's exploring this now, I want to be more fully aligned with ministry So she is potentially filling out an application to become an InterAct missionary that will be in a kind of a different category of professional membership, but then she would get all the training that we have. And so it's only a year old. March will be, we launched last March, and our first speaker was the previous education commissioner for Alaska, Michael Johnson, who is now at Columbia International University. Wow. So he's still kind of an interested partner weighing in.
You just whet my appetite on that, because I've been thinking about that lately for this show.
You don't have them with you.
No,
more dots we need to connect.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I need to let you guys go because you're probably going to be late.
We're going to be late. We are going to be late. And I don't have an email, or I would email him.
That's okay. We'll connect. I have your number and we'll make it happen. So
the problem is when you get into these engaging conversations, time disappears.
It does.
It just melts.
It does. I don't even want to tell you how long this is going for, but
I know.
All right. Thank you guys for coming on the show. I learned so much right now, and we have a lot of dots to connect. So I'll let you guys go.
We're just down the road, so
we're just down the road from me.
We need a picture. At least you two.
Yeah, we'll get a picture. Let me close the show.
Yep.
Okay.
And then we'll take a picture.
Good.
Yeah. Thank you guys. We're done. That's close.
Okay.
Thank you for coming on the show. See you later.
We'd love to be here. Thanks.
Good. Bye.